Nothing in the Lou Brydges Show is intended to be legal analysis, legal advice, or legal recommendations that would be applicable to your particular situation. Everyone in foreclosure or underwater with their mortgage are encouraged to seek legal counsel for a review of your specific situation. Welcome to the weekly broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history that created it. Are you in foreclosure, at risk of foreclosure, or underwater with your mortgage? Do you know someone who is? Every week on this show, you'll get real answers from a real attorney. Lou Brydges will explain options in the foreclosure process. He'll talk about defective mortgages, mortgage restructuring, loan modification, short sale negotiation, and discuss what to look for when choosing a foreclosure defense attorney. Lou is an experienced foreclosure defense lawyer on the front lines of mortgage defense and litigation. Lou is dedicated to helping you keep your property. And now, it's time for the Lou Brydges Show and the truth about foreclosure. Here's your host, Lou Brydges.
Good morning, Chicago. Another beautiful Saturday morning. I'm Lou Brydges. I heard the Lou Brydges Show with my wingman, Mike Main.
Good morning, Chicago.
And we have a guest producer this week, Eric Thomas, who's actually the supervising producer here at the station. Debbie Schreiber, our usual producer's on vacation, so bear with us. Eric it's been a while since he's actually done the hands-on on this. He's one of those supervisors that, in any event, boy, what a week we've had in the developments in the foreclosure field. We usually start out with reading the quote from Thomas Jefferson that is the inspiration for this show, along with the mission I feel that I have to spread the truth about the greatest financial crime spree in history. We have to get the announcer. We have to tell him it's a crime spree that began about a little over a decade ago now in the origination of mortgages and is continuing to this day by the banks, the 12 major banks that service mortgages. And boy, are they starting to squirm, because this week alone, we've had whistleblowers, we've had lawsuits filed against them, because, I need to reemphasize, these major banks that service the mortgages don't own the mortgage. They make far more money servicing the mortgages that are in foreclosure than they do the performing mortgages, which is why they have been sabotaging the efforts in the modification. All the government programs, all the supposed private, in-house modification programs that they've agreed to with the government to address past abuses that they've admitted and they've been caught in. But as it turns out, they have 6 whistleblowers this week came out. And I'm going to read you some of the headlines and some of the content, because this is going to be a very news-heavy segment of the show. Bank of America senior collector, quote, in an affidavit and in a deposition, I lied because I was told to lie. And this affidavit shows exactly why why people need both a lawyers and a forensic computer experts and a forensic investigator in all cases. Law firms lacking these resources and lacking private investigators are not equipped well enough to do battle with these lying behemoths. And now I'm reading from the Living Lies website of the grandfather of foreclosure defense attorneys, Neil Garfield, who's out of Florida, who pretty much started this whole new field of law, and who has been sort of my distant mentor. I've been an attorney for 33 years, but obviously foreclosure defense is, for all people, kind of a new field. I've been doing it for 5 years now, and boy, has it been an uphill battle. My partner, Scott O, has also been doing this for 5 years. We recently merged our practices. And boy, have we found out some things. And among the things we're finding out, and we've found out over the last 5 years and been arguing in front of the judges and trying to publicize to the public, well, it's all coming out now in depositions, in Senate investigations, congressional investigations. Eric Schneiderman's doing some outstanding work. And this deposition comes out of a case, I believe, in New York, in which the senior collector and 5 of his people that were also in the supposed loan modification departments at Bank of America, they all came out and they said, we were told to give people the runaround. We were told to lie to people that they would get that their modification application was in process, that everything looked good. Meanwhile, the foreclosure lawsuits are proceeding. You see, basically what they're doing is sandbagging people. And if any of you have ever applied for a modification, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're saying, geez, that's exactly what happened to me. Because Bank of America isn't alone. All 12 of the major bank servicers have been doing this. Believe me, I know. I've been doing this for 5 years now, since the very start of this whole thing. And, what my partner and I brought to the table was experienced litigation. I've been practicing law for 33 years. He's been practicing for about 25 years. And in litigation. And, I was doing construction litigation, foreclosing mechanics liens and representing, contractors and the like. And this foreclosure thing came along and the construction industry dried up. And that's how I got into this, beginning back in about 2009, 2010. And we immediately uncovered that, hey, the bank doesn't own the mortgage. They're just a servicer. Banks don't loan their own money. They service loans. And the money was provided either by the investors or by the federal government through the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans. So chances are about 99.9% if you have a mortgage that it's either been securitized with the private securitization or it's owned by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. And the bank that you're dealing with, Wells Fargo, Chase Manhattan, Bank of America, U.S. Bank, Deutsche Bank, Citibank, are just the servicers of the mortgage. And to illustrate why the servicing is where the money is really in the mortgages, is if your Wells Fargo services 7 million mortgages, and this has all been documented and out and released in public, if they are getting $10 per mortgage that's performing, they're getting $70 million for opening the envelope, collecting the check, depositing it at their bank. That's what they do. They, process money and then forward it to the investor or to the federal government who owns the mortgage. So $70 million a month is a nice little, revenue stream. But if 1 million, just 14% of those 7 million mortgages that they service are in foreclosure, they charge $300 per month for that 1 million, for each of those 1 million. That comes to $300 million a month. So they got $300 million on those, and the other $6 million, they're getting $60 million. So their monthly revenues have gone from $70 million to $360 million because they've got $1 million in foreclosure. That's a difference for purposes to make the math simple. Allow me to call that a difference of $300 million. It's really $290 million. But $300 million multiplied by 12 months is $3.6 billion of additional revenue. That is why Wells Fargo and the other major banks that services mortgages have been giving you the runaround in the modification efforts. That is why they've been sabotaging the modification efforts. That is why the HAMP program that was supposed to be a stopgap measure to start offering relief to homeowners was an abject failure because the servicing banks are sabotaging it because it's a revenue stream for them. And they don't own the mortgage. And the investors that own the mortgage actually, because of the private mortgage insurance, the credit default swap derivatives, or the government guarantees, the investors have been paid off. Which begs the question, has there really been a default on the note because it's been paid off? And if there has been a default, well, then the investor certainly wasn't damaged. So how why is it that they're foreclosing? They're not. The foreclosures are brought in the name of the servicer. The servicer forecloses, sells the house, and uses the proceeds to pay that $300 per month, which they also deduct from the mortgages that are performing. But the thing is, the servicers have been, they were part of the whole formation of this, along with the investment banks. And in the pooling and service agreements, the PSAs, as they're known, and you're going to hear a lot about PSAs in the coming years, because it's coming out that this whole thing was kind of set up beforehand by a very, very, very small select group of people in Wall Street, involving the investment banks and the major banks that are servicing the mortgages. The investment banks put together the pools, they bundled and packaged the mortgages. They were the ones that were giving the huge incentives to the originators so that the originators would cut corners, would actually falsify loan applications. Homeowners didn't falsify loan applications. 20 million Americans didn't wake up one morning between 1998 and 2008 and say we're going to commit bank fraud today. It was the originators and the appraisals that overvalued the property. All of this was done to produce the mortgages because they had already been sold. The money had been raised, and the mortgages had to be placed within 90 days in order to satisfy securities laws. So the banks that are going to be the servicers of these mortgages, they don't mind that there's going to be a lot in foreclosure because that takes their annual revenues up to $3.6 billion because there's going to be a lot in foreclosure when you overvalue the houses by as much as $100,000. And the fact is, there are still 20 million Americans that are either behind in their mortgage, in foreclosure, or underwater, which means they own more of the mortgage than it's worth. So I digressed a little bit there, but this is, a show that we just do off the cuff, and we try to cover as much information as we can, because that's the objective of this show, is to spread the truth, because that is coming out. That is going to unravel this whole Ponzi scheme, criminal spree, and the truth is coming out in the form of these whistleblowers. So stay tuned. We're going to break down for a little sports and weather. Stay tuned, and we're going to go through some of these more revelations that are just going to curl your toes, because foreclosure activity is up, and it's going to continue for another 5 to 10 years. This is the story of our generation, and this is the battle of our generation. Never give up the land.
224-513-1231. Call us. We'll give you a free consultation. Also, join us on Facebook at The Lou Brydges Show on Facebook. And FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. You can find out more.
Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back, listeners. Lou Brydges here with sideman Mike Main and our producer Eric Thomas. In the last segment, I digressed a little bit, but I was reading from some news releases this past week, and I want to continue with one that was widely reported. New York Times, Huffington Post, Investor Center, Washington Post, New York Times, Washington Post. I mentioned those, and also, of course, Living Lies, the webpage that is run by Neil Garfeld from Florida. One of the other great web pages that is followed by attorneys like around the country is stopforeclosurefraud.com, which is out of Florida too. We actually have on our staff now, Scott, the firm we put together, we've got, obviously we've got paralegals that do nothing but handle the modification application process, and attorneys that defend the cases in court and negotiate the restructurings, and if homeowners want a short sale, and clerks that do things, and it's just a whole. We have client liaisons that maintain contact with the clients, but we have two researchers who do nothing but follow all the cases and the news and everything that happens around the country in the foreclosure field. It used to take one person. It used to take me. I would spend about an hour a day doing it 5 years ago. Now I have two full-time people that do nothing but follow on the web, on the internet, the developments around the country in all the courts. And we collect all these cases. And I want to read you something from Living Lies. He was talking about the affidavit from the 6 processors at Bank of America who are whistleblowers. They came clean, and they actually had to. I guess they were going to bring a deposition in a case. And they also gave affidavits. But they all admitted that they were told to lie to homeowners who had modifications. They lied to them about the progress of their application for loan modification because they're sandbagging them, so they ignore the lawsuit in court, so they get a default judgment against them. See, so many people, I've had hundreds of clients this way. They get a summons, they get sued for foreclosure because they're behind in their mortgage. The same day, they get a phone call from somebody at the bank saying, hey, guess what? You will qualify for a modification. All you have to do is fill out the application. Are you interested? Well, yeah, I just got served with the summons. Oh, don't worry about that lawsuit. You could pursue the loan modification process. Don't worry about the lawsuit. So then they get a default judgment. And meanwhile, if you've ever applied for a modification, they lose the documents. They say they've lost the documents. The affidavits of these whistleblowers say, we didn't lose documents. We didn't do this. It says we were given, at the end of the month, we went through and we automatically denied a bunch, but we basically misled homeowners into thinking that the modification process was going forward, that we had misplaced their documents, please refile, please resubmit all the applications, that their application was under consideration. They don't need to worry about the foreclosure lawsuit because we're going to give them a modification. They even gave temporary modifications to some people. And many of you have had temporary modifications and been religious and paid 6 months in a row on time with the modification. And then then you get the word one day, oh, by the way, we've denied your application for permanent modification was denied, and we're selling your house next week. Selling my house next week? Yeah, the foreclosure lawsuit was proceeding during the modification process. But anyway, the affidavits of these individuals is why I'm reading from Living Lies. Previously, judges were resisting pleadings, arguments, and discovery from attorneys like myself and Neil Garfeld and those directed at the credibility and truthfulness of the testimony and affidavits of the foreclosing representatives of the banks if they were submitted by the well-known banks, which all 12 are well-known banks or institutions, Wells Fargo, Citi, J.P. Morgan, Deutsche. We all know the culprits. As time passed, more and more judges were beginning to discern inconsistencies in the pleadings and the proofs of the banks, but they still thought the banks were most likely in possession of the truth. But now all of that's changing. All of that's unraveling because through the discovery process, we found that there is fabrication of documents on a mass, factory-like scale. These whistleblowers described factories, banks of personnel, temporary personnel hired to do nothing but sign documents all day, forge signatures of vice presidents, claim that they're a vice president of the bank and that they've reviewed the documents and that the numbers all add up and everything. But there's records of Bank of America employees having documents. They have swearing that they reviewed documents, computer systems showing that the documents weren't there, inconsistencies in the claim of who owns the mortgage. And all of this are deficiencies that we as attorneys, experienced litigation attorneys, can use to fight off the foreclosure. I have cases that have been pending for 5 years. Now, being in foreclosure and paying a monthly fee to an attorney is not an end game. That's why we have a broad front approach at Brydges O. We have attorneys who defend the foreclosure and negotiate a restructuring. We have people that are modification experts, that paralegals that do nothing but process the applications for modification. But I want to digress here for one moment. If you're underwater, if you owe more on the property than it's worth, a modification is not a good deal. A modification alone is not a good deal because you're still underwater and you're still, if you're $100,000 underwater, you're 25, 28 years away from having one penny of equity in that property. So why would you continue to pay the taxes on the property? Why would you continue to pay them, a modified mortgage when you're just basically renting the property? Well, the answer is restructuring. What is restructuring is going to be the way to resolve the 20 million homes that are underwater. The principal balance has to be reduced to reflect the truth about what the property is worth, and that it's a fair deal. Homeowners that we represent, we tell them, you're not going to get your home free and clear of a mortgage. Don't hire us if that's what you want. What we will achieve, what our engagement agreement is to achieve a fair mortgage, which is usually a reduction in principal balance of up to $100,000, sometimes more, to reflect the true fair market value of the property. Our strategy is to get a forensic and a securitization investigation and report from an experienced mortgage industry specialist, an expert witness, if you will. These expert witnesses provide us the basis to plead what are called affirmative defenses and to conduct discovery and use other litigation tools like request to admit. Now, I'm getting very technical here and almost giving you a course in civil procedure, but the objective is to find the truth. Because when we have the truth, we can represent you and negotiate a fair deal. As long as you have the truth, then the chances are that you've got ammunition, call it, so that we can use to force the bank to negotiate a restructuring of the mortgage. And we've been very successful in getting restructurings of the mortgages when we have time. You can't wait, though, until your house is up for sale. We have a lot of clients that call us and, my God, I've just received notice my house is up for sale. Well, we rush into court and we file a motion to vacate the judgment, and that holds off the sale for a while. But the motion to vacate the judgment, eventually the judge is going to say, well, this lawsuit was filed over a year ago. Where have the homeowners been? Why haven't they defended it early? I entered this judgment over 3 months ago. And the bank, the plaintiff's attorneys have scheduled the property for sale. Well, Judge, they were in a modification program, and they had been advised not to worry about the lawsuit. Well, but they received a summons in the mail that said, you must appear in this lawsuit and defend it, or a default judgment will be entered against you. Yes, Judge, but they were told by the people they were dealing with in the modification department that they didn't need to worry about the lawsuit. So they ignored what they were served with in summons, an official document from this court, because of something somebody told them on the telephone? Yes, Judge, that's what they did. They trusted the big banks. Well, the judges at first were skeptical about this because, everybody could say that and then, just ignore the lawsuit for a year. But now when the judges have heard this 300, 400, 500 times, they're starting to listen a little closer. Even in Cook County, where the courts have been acting more as foreclosure mills than actual courts of justice, but that's even changing now as they start to realize that the homeowners have been the victims. The homeowners were the victims of the Ponzi scheme that drove up the price of real estate in America by 131% over a 10-year period, thereby creating $5.5 trillion of illusory capital that the investment banks bundled, packaged, and sold to investors, and then also bought these credit default swaps. Anyway, we're running out of time in this segment. The key thing to remember is that we have the goods on them. All the lies are starting to unravel, as lies will. You know, I've said before, and people roll their eyes, but every lie, when I say it again, but every lie requires 3 lies to cover it up, and every one of those 3 more. And I tell our young attorneys, we have but one weapon, and that's all we need, and that's the truth. Because the truth will make us invincible. The truth is like the sword of Excalibur. It will eventually prevail, because the lies will unravel, and the lies are unraveling now. So if you're in foreclosure, facing foreclosure, give us a call. We'll give you a free consultation.
224-513-1231. You can also ask us questions for the show there. As well, go to Facebook, The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y, by the way. And FightIllinoisForeclosures.com.
But whatever you do, people, remember, never give up the land. Fight for truth and justice. You do that, and I guarantee you'll never be alone. Not in this country. Not as long as I'm around.
Louis Brydges of the law firm Brydges & O & Associates, one of the leading foreclosure defense firms in the Chicago area, rejoins you now on the Lou Brydges Show. Here's Lou on how you might avoid foreclosure and deal with a mortgage that's underwater.
Welcome back, listeners. You know, I was cut out last segment I finished. I was talking about the Bank of America whistleblowers who were supposedly, according to Reuters, reports that the Bank of America paid bonuses of target gifts to modification employees for steering cases into foreclosure. Fired them if they didn't go after foreclosure. 6 former Bank of America employees testified in court that Bank of America modification and foreclosure specialists were paid and instructed to lie to homeowners, paid with gift cards if they successfully threw the homeowner into foreclosure, and were disciplined or fired if they failed to turn over the request for modification into the right number of foreclosures.
So the people who were supposed to be helping to get a modification in place were actually being bonused to get you in foreclosure instead.
Absolutely, and it goes back to the fact that they make $300 per case in foreclosure and $110 for every file that's performing. So if you want a modification, if you're underwater, you want a modification, but you need a modification with restructuring. You need a lawyer to challenge the representation, the lost documents, the incomplete applications for modifications, and you especially need a lawyer or a HUD counselor to submit the cover letter with the specific proposal for modification and affidavits from the experts, the forensic and the securitization mortgage industry specialists who have investigated and compiled the documents showing who actually owns the mortgage and that the transfers were not done in accordance with the Illinois Conveyances Act, Recorders Act, Notaries Act. You see, the big thing, it all goes back to, it's ironic, it all goes back to the statute of frauds, which was from England in the 1500s. And I know if you get me digressing on the history of law, the show will be an 8-10-hour show. But the statute of frauds is codified in Illinois as the Conveyances Act, and it requires that all transfers be in recordable forms. And the people of the state of Illinois and all states constituted a government that includes a recorder of deeds office. And the recorder of deeds were bypassed by these banks, and they used this mortgage electronic registry, which has fallen apart like a cheap suit. And it's just not sustainable from a legal standpoint, and has been it's pretty much abandoned now. But the bottom line is that most of the mortgages that were originated, just about all of them that were originated between 1998 and 2008, were done through MERS. And which means that there wasn't an actual transfer and assignment of the mortgage from the original Countrywide or Taylor Bean Financial or Lennox Financial, whoever was the originator, who was just a broker, by the way, not the actual lender. The lender is actually an institution, either the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or a New York or Delaware trust that is issued mortgage-backed securities to raise the money to fund the mortgage. The big bank is not there. They are the servicer. They aren't the lender. They are the servicer, and they can foreclose the mortgage in their own name. But the collection of the note has raised another big problem because they're actually violating the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the Fair Debt Credit Reporting Act, by attempting to collect a debt that is not owed to them. And there's some class action lawsuits that have been brought now against, there's a class action lawsuit pending here in Illinois brought against Cadillus and Associates, one of the big foreclosure defense firms, accusing them of violating the Fair Debt Collection Practices and the Fair Debt Credit Reporting Act by attempting to collect a debt on behalf of somebody who they knew wasn't owed the money, because the servicing bank is not owed the money. And they may have a right to foreclose on the mortgage under the Illinois Mortgage Foreclosure Law on behalf of their principal, who actually owns the mortgage, but they don't have a right to collect on the note. So if you have a modification, strike that. You need to homeowners need to recognize that this is something that you're not asking for an unfair deal because of asking for a restructuring, a reduction of mortgage, or doing what we lay out as an option. We explain as an option the strategic default. Now, you are going to start to see strategic defaults by the millions, because 20 million Americans are going to start to wake up and say, if you owe $250,000 on a house that's worth $150,000, if you're paying a $250,000 mortgage on a $150,000 mortgage, you're overpaying by almost $1,000 per month for that house every month. And you're paying the taxes as well on something that you're 28 years away from having any ownership interest in. And a strategic default, based on an investigation into the securitization and the origination of the loan that shows multiple defects and violations of law in both the origination and failed securitization, is going to give a competent attorney the leverage to negotiate a restructuring. That is a reduction of principal balance down to $150,000 to reflect the true fair market value of the property. And that's all the homeowners are asking for, is a fair deal. If the house is a $150,000 house, that's always what it's been. This appraisal that was manipulated by the originator so they got a bigger commission and they produced the mortgages that Wall Street was demanding was not done in accordance with appraisal guidelines, wasn't done in accordance with the federal regulations for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac mortgages, and therefore was an appraisal that was a fraud for the purpose of inducing you to sign a note, a mortgage for $250,000. That's called fraudulent inducement. Mike's going to give you some information about where to contact us for a free consultation and where to get some more information.
Okay, join us on Facebook. Interact with us there, please. The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y. 224-513-1231. Call us for a free consultation. And you can get more information as well from FightIllinoisForeclosures.com.
But never give up the land. Fight for truth and justice. This is the battle of our generation.
We now return to the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history. Here's Lou Brydges, an attorney on the front lines of the ongoing battle for our land.
Yeah, welcome back, listeners. I was talking about the modification and how if you're underwater, a modification is not a good deal. There are some circumstances in which it would be a good deal if you're underwater, but what you really need is a restructuring. Now, the circumstances in which a modification might be a good deal is if you've got, like, say, some children in high school and you want them to finish out the high school and you got about 2 or 3 years and the bank won't give you a restructuring and you want to stay in the school district and after that you're going to move or retire or in a situation like that just to get the payments down. But the thing is, if you're underwater, many people can't sell the house and relocate because the payoff letter is going to be far more than they're going to get in the sale. And those people are stuck. What do those people do? Well, give us a call. We have some options we can discuss with you, but mostly it's going to always involve negotiating down what is a lie. The appraisal, the supposed value, the cost of the balance due on the mortgage is all a lie. That's not what the house is worth. And it's not a situation. I mean, there's some of you out there, I'm sure, are thinking, well, too bad. I made a bad investment and you got to, eat it. No. This isn't a bad investment. It wasn't an investment in the first place. It was a purchase of the home. And the reason that you overpaid, or the reason that the mortgage is more than the the value of the house is because there was an appraisal who said it was worth this much at some point in time. And that appraisal, we find, as part of our investigation, was not done in accordance with the federal regulations for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac mortgages, and was not done in accordance with the appraisal guidelines. And why was that? Why was that appraiser manipulated? I'll tell you why. Because the originator wouldn't have sent the referral. The originator, you didn't hire the appraiser, the originator did. The originator hired that appraisal in order for there to be an appraisal so that you would sign the note and mortgage. And they all knew that this was something that was all done at the behest of Wall Street, who was giving huge bonuses and paying their commissions in order to produce the mortgages because they've already been sold in the securitization process. So that is called at law fraudulent inducement, deceptive inducement, illegal inducement, unlawful inducement, which brings into question, that's an affirmative defense. And that gives you the leverage to demand a restructuring. Now, getting back to the moral issue, the fairness of it. Let me give you an example. If somebody comes to you and says, look, I've got this great investment thing you can make. It's called Bernie Madoff. And he returns 20% every year. But he requires a minimum of $50,000 investment. But I talked to him. He's a friend of mine. He'll take $10,000 a month from you, provided you sign a contract that says you're going to give him $10,000 a month, and then after 5 months, you'll have your $50,000 and you'll be getting 20% every year. So you say, okay. Then after you paid it $10,000 first month, you paid it $10 the second month, and then you hear somebody say that Bernie Madoff is running a Ponzi scheme, that it's all lies, it's all inducement. Now, you signed a contract. Do you have a contractual obligation to continue to perform? Well, I'll tell you that under the law, the answer is no. I won't tell you what the moral, I won't give you the moral answer. You can make that yourself. But I will point out to you that you have a family also to support. And if you've been duped into a bad deal by unlawful, deceptive lies and misdeeds and layers and omissions in the origination process, do you have a duty to continue to perform that contract, or do you have a duty to yourself and your family? I'm not going to answer that question for you. Only you can answer that moral question. I will explain to you your legal options and give you some things you can do. But when it comes to modification, Mike points out to me an article that they came across, and we had our fact people to verify it, because we always our fact people verify everything. 47% of loan modifications go back into default and foreclosure within the first year. So the modification here, he's got the source.
Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Oh,
Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Well, I don't know if that's such a reliable source, Mike. That's a U.S. government position, but I'm sure that they have their sources, which is probably some sort of study. And I'm no big fan of the OCC, because, the OCC is the one that's been acting in the bank pockets by giving them this the so-called foreclosure settlement. Now, foreclosure activity is not going down. Foreclosure activity, is reported by Zacks Equity Research, is up for the, again, up 2% in April 2013, up 4%. And Illinois is one of the top 5 states for foreclosure. Now, I know that a lot of the judges, particularly in Cook County, feel that it was their duty to push through the foreclosures as quickly as possible in order to clear their dockets. In point of fact, all that does is aggravate the foreclosure process, because you've got more vacant houses. The housing prices are depressed even further. If you had been listening to the attorneys like myself who were raising defenses, if you've been listening to us 2 or 3 years ago, we would have been forcing the banks to modify more and more mortgages. When we get to raise the defenses, we can negotiate a restructuring and a modification. Judges that refuse to let us raise these defenses, we take it up on appeal, and we're getting great results in the appellate court. We've got a couple of opinions out of the 2nd District in the last, so far this year, that are very favorable. And the Supreme Court recently amended some rules that have been abused by the foreclosure mill attorneys to require them to produce the documentation up front. And things are changing. And even in Cook County, the judges are going to have to start to realize that they were that the judicial system was established to administer justice based on the truth, and the truth invites in, a look-see. It's the lies that don't want to be examined. And when we examine everything here, we find that there is failed securitization, gaps in the chain of title, missing mortgages. Our attorneys in our office are well trained in how to assert these from a legal standpoint. And you need to fight, people. You need to fight for your land. This is the battle of evermore. It's always been about the land. It always will be about the land. It's the only thing that's real.
224-513-1231. Facebook, The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y. And FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. Come interact with us. Ask us some questions. We appreciate it.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back, listeners. Lou Brydges with Mike Main, my side wingman here, and our Eric Thomas, our producer this week. I haven't read, and first of all, I want to thank all the many listeners who have been calling in and giving us encouragement. And some people aren't even in foreclosure, been calling in and say they never missed the show and they really enjoy listening to it. And because what we're speaking and why I took this on was to promote my law firm, sure, but it was also I just felt that a need, a calling that I've got to spread the truth. I got to do something important. I got to live for something. If you don't have something worth, I got to die for something. If you don't have something worth dying for, you have nothing worth living for. And this is important because this is the battle of our time. So I'm going to read you the Thomas Jefferson quote because this is what it's all really about. Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1802, when we had just formed this country, he wrote that I believe that the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow the banks to control the currency, then the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will eventually deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. And that is what is happening today. You see, mortgages used to be done by local community banks loaning money to community members. It was community deposits loaned to the other members of the community to build homes and businesses, and everything was done honestly. But when the major big banks squeezed out the local banks out of the mortgage business, and these 12 major banks took over the servicing, and in conjunction with Wall Street started this bundling and packaging of mortgage-backed securities. And by the way, securitization, if it's done properly, is kind of a good idea for mortgages, but that's another topic. But what this is happening is it involved the greatest single transfer of wealth in human history. Those who really study this in depth, and I can give you the list of 20 books that have been written about it, and of course the leading one is Too Big to Fail, and all the criminals are here. And I'm going to bring you a list of the books to read on this because this is what consumes my life. But this is the battle of our generation because there has been home ownership is at a lower percentage now than it's been since 1962. And there's more children living under the poverty line than it's any time since 1958, I think is the number. Because this has been the largest single transfer of wealth, $5.5 trillion, to a very, very, very small handful of people on Wall Street and heading up the major banks of this country. And it's time for the American people to stand up and fight for truth and justice. We can't give this away. We've come too far to just give it away to these, coke-snorting, whoremongering Wall Street investment bankers. You got to stand up and fight for the land and not give up. And if we do that, this could turn out to be like it could turn out to be a good thing, bringing back the balance of things. But don't give up your home. Don't give up your community. Fight for truth and justice. That's what lawyers like myself and my partner Scott O will help you out. We'll feel honored and privileged to help you out. But never give up the land. Fight for truth and justice, and you do that, and I guarantee you will not be alone.
Facebook.com, The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y. 224-513-1231.
You've been listening to the weekly radio broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show with attorney Louis Brydges, telling the truth about foreclosure. Have you received threats of foreclosure? Are you in a foreclosure right now, seeking a loan modification, considering strategic default, or any other legal action? Know and protect your rights, and do not give up the land. Lou Brydges' passion is to help you keep your home and achieve your legal goals. To receive a free consultation, which may help you decide how to defend against foreclosure, understand your options, and learn what to look for in choosing a foreclosure defense attorney, call 224-513-1231.